Right. Well, that's good. So you stepped out at an intelligent time. And so then you started your comedy career and you started at open mics. And so like, tell me about how that developed.
Well, open mic nights are very interesting. You sign up on a list and you may or may not get on. They pick people out of a hat. Like say if there's 50 people sign up, 30 people get on. And, you each do 5 minutes. And, the host is generally a professional comedian that brings people up. And, you have this weird culture of people that are struggling to try to figure out how to make a living in this sort of undefined art form. There's no classes you can take in it that are really worth anything. There's no books that you can buy that are going to teach you anything. It's something that you kind of have to. The only thing that I liken to is rap music, because rap music seems to be very similar in the fact that you have to learn from other practitioners. You don't really learn from books. There's no maybe there is now. I don't know of any real legitimate university courses on stand-up comedy. I don't think they could teach it to you anyway because everyone does it differently. But I think that's the case with rap music as well. I think you kind of have to learn from the people that are already doing it. And one good thing about stand-up comedy, particularly today it's much more open and inviting, and comedians have a lot more camaraderie than they did in the beginning because they're not fighting over scraps anymore. Now there's so many venues, so many different places to work. And then there's YouTube and the internet, and comedians, there's much more of a supportive community of people trying to help people. And I try to really concentrate on that. I spend a lot of time trying to help young comics. I put a lot of young comics on my shows. I have them host. I've got a show tonight, and a young comic who's only been doing it for a few years. Her name's Ali Makovsky. She's the host of it. She's really funny. And I try to encourage them. I try to help them. I try to give them advice. I try to give them pointers. I try to, when they have great sets, I try to, really thank them and say that was excellent and you got this. Just keep doing what you're doing, and you can really make a career doing this, because it's such a insecure business. It's such a weird, undefined path that you have to take. And I love the art form. I love it as a consumer. I love it as a person who's an audience member. I really still to this day enjoy watching stand up. But back then it wasn't that supportive. There was, we would just support each other, but the professionals weren't that supportive. Not like they are today. A few people, there's a guy named Lenny Clark that I'm still good friends with to this day. And I opened up for him. He was a Boston legend. And I was super fortunate to open up for him when I had been doing comedy for about a year. And he gave me some great advice, and that meant the world to me. And he was actually on my podcast just last month. I love that guy. And, he helped me out when I was I was 21. I was really, really young in my comedy career.
And so you started putting the same amount of dedication into that you had been putting into the martial arts.
Exactly. Yeah. I just became obsessed with it, and I just traveled all over the place doing open mic nights. I mean, me and my good friend, Greg Fitzsimmons, we started out together. We're good friends to this day. We started out within a week of each other. And we used to travel all the way to Rhode Island. We would drive, it was an hour plus drive to go down there just to do 5 minutes. And then we were at an open mic night for free. And then we'd drive all the way home and just dream about one day being a professional. That was the dream. The dream was to pay your bills by doing comedy. Right. Imagine if you could do comedy for a living. Like, that was the dream. I would never imagine that I'm doing what I'm doing now, where I'm doing these sold out arenas. Like that wasn't even a hope. And it wasn't even like, maybe if it goes well, I could do this. Maybe I could do that. That was never on the menu. And, it's gotten to this really crazy, astronomical place now that it's very hard for me to even imagine that came out of those strange days in Boston, just traveling around to all these different weird comedy clubs and writing constantly and not knowing how to write, not knowing how to formulate a joke, having like many more misses than hits. A lot of bombing. I bombed all the time. I was humiliated on stage.
As well, man. You got to have that ability to bomb and come back from it. I mean, because you're going to have a lot more misses than hits. That's for sure. That's a
lot more. Yeah.
So,
especially in the early days.
What do you think accounts for that obsessiveness that you described? I mean, that's a negative way of putting it. I mean, obviously, you said that, when you were in school, if you weren't interested, you weren't listening at all. But if you were interested in something, you were like laser focused. And that really came up in the martial arts, but it obviously manifested itself in the stand-up comedy too. So what is it about you that enables you? What do you think it is about you that enables you to zero in on something like that to the exclusion of everything else?
I don't know. I mean, I think some of it has to be attributed to the unhappiness in my childhood. That when I would find something that I did get some joy out of, I would just concentrate all in on that. I think some of it also was like I wasn't really raised with a lot of discipline, and I wasn't really raised with I mean, my parents were both, my stepdad and my mom were both working all the time, so they weren't really around to sort of tell me what to do or how to live, and they weren't really around to let me know that everything was going to be okay. They were always working, so they would come home from work at like 6 o'clock or something like that, and I'd been on my own all day. Me and my sister had been on our own all day. We'd come home, we had a key, we got into the house, and it was when there was a lot of real bad feelings, like, and when I found something that made me feel good, I just did that exclusively. That's all I did. And I still have that problem to this day. When I get obsessed with something, if I find something that means something to me, I think of it all day long. If I get obsessed with something, it becomes like a mantra that's in the back of my head, and I have to shut it off. Like, I have to do my best to shut it off. Otherwise, I can't listen to people. I don't like when people are talking to me. I don't want to talk to them. I want to go do that thing that I want to do.
Right.
And it becomes like a compulsion. And it could be socially negative, it could be detrimental to relationships and friendships.
Yeah. But it seems like that sort of thing is also absolutely necessary if you're going to develop high-level skill at something difficult and unlikely, because unless you're obsessive about it and practice it like all the time, the people you're competing with they're gonna take you out. So the funny thing,
I would always be terrified that I would run into someone like me.
Well, I can understand.
That's what I was terrified of. But that was the fear, that I would run into someone who is 100% all in. And when I was fighting and when I lost my last kickboxing fight, I wasn't all in. And I knew I wasn't all in. And I knew I wasn't the same person I was when I was like 18, 19. I was a psychopath. I mean, I was 100% committed to doing nothing but that. And then as I was examining my future prospects in my life and I started to become more aware of the problems of what I was doing, I became less and less. I had one fight that I had in California, in Anaheim, in the U.S. Nationals in 1980. It must have been it seems like it had to have been 86 or 87, somewhere around there. 87? Somewhere around 87. I knocked this guy out with a head kick, and I did in front of his parents, and it was people were crying, and he was unconscious for a long time. He was unconscious for a solid half hour.
Ooh.
And they dragged him off of the mat. They put him in a stretcher. They took him to the hospital. I never saw him regain consciousness. And I remember thinking that could have easily been me. Like, I didn't have any illusions of me being some impervious, invulnerable person. And I was really thinking about how I hit him so hard, my heel was hurting the next day. I was walking with a limp from his head because I wheel kicked him in the head. It's a particularly brutal move where you spin and your whole leg comes around. You're hitting someone in the head with your heel. And he fell like he had gotten shot. Just fell face first, out cold, snoring. It wasn't the first time that I'd done that to someone, but it was one of the most brutal because he kind of ran into it too. He was trying to kick me as I was kicking him. So it was the force of his body coming towards me and me hitting him. And I was thinking, that guy's probably never going to be the same again. Like, he's never going to get over it psychologically, or if he does, it's going to be very hard for him. but he might be damaged for the rest of his life. That's a real possibility. And then I started thinking, am I willing to have that happen to me at 19? I was 19 years old. I was like, is this what you want to do? Do you want to get hit in the head like that and never be the same again at 19? Because it easily can happen, you know?
Yeah,
we were at
60 years to live like that.
Yeah, we were at this was a national championship tournament. So he was a state championship, I think, from Illinois, and I was a state champion from Massachusetts. And it wasn't like he was a black belt. I mean, it wasn't like he was an unskilled guy. So the fact that I was able to do that to him, and I was able to do that to a bunch of other guys, I knew that someone out there could do that to me.
Right.
I knew that I wasn't the best in the world, and I knew that even though I was I was a real national level competitor, I wasn't world class. I wasn't the best, especially at 19. And so that doubt stuck with me for the next couple of years, and it was probably the first seed of my new future was me hurting that guy and thinking about what that was going to be like if that happened to me.
Yeah, well, that's a hell of a right turn you took there to go into comedy. So, okay, so how now you became successful as a comedian? So you started playing in little clubs like stand-up comedians did, and like,
yeah,
how'd you get your breaks, and how'd your career develop?
It took a few years for me to get competent. It took like 2 or 3 years for me to get competent. And then 3 years in, I got extremely fortunate again, where I met my manager, who's my manager to this day. He basically picked me up when I was an open mic comedian. I mean, I was getting a few paid gigs here and there, but I was really an amateur. And he found me. He was looking for new talent. He came up from New York. He was a really well respected and well recognized manager. Still is, of course. His name's Jeff Sussman, and we've been together for now it must be 28 years. Yeah, we've been together since I was an amateur. And
that's a successful collaboration to span that amount of time. Not many changes.
Yeah. We've been together forever. We don't even have a contract anymore. We haven't had a contract, I think, for like 10 years.
So during all this time, this is just like a bit of a side question here, but you ever have any time at all to pursue relationships with women?
Oh, yeah. Well, you do comedy, you're in clubs at night.
Yeah.
You have most of your day to do whatever you want. When I was just a stand-up comedian, I had a lot of free time. I mean, you're writing jokes, but you can only do that a couple hours a day, or you get bored and then it's not effective. And then you're just kind of living your life and hanging out. And sometimes the best way to develop your comedy is to have good social interactions. It's actually kind of important when you're an aspiring comedian to be in a lot of social situations, because you're around people, you hear people say things, and then you think what they say is silly, or what they say is, you disagree or you agree. You see perspectives and points of view, and you kind of you develop an understanding of how human beings behave. It's kind of very important. So yeah, I was around a lot of different girls and a lot of guys, and just being out, and you're always at comedy clubs and nightclubs, but I didn't go out other than that. If I wasn't at a comedy club at night, I probably wasn't out. It was always the same thing with like my obsession with fighting. And fighting came way easier for me than stand-up did. Stand-up was way harder. For me, it was way harder. It was way harder to achieve confidence.
What was harder about it? Well, you said it took you 2 or 3 years to get competent. So that was a lot of falling flat on your face, I presume.
Yeah. And even then, even like 3 years in, I still could bomb at any moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could have a bad set. I didn't know how to do it. But also, I was socially awkward. I think it took me a while to not be so socially awkward. That was an issue. And, it was a lot of it was from my upbringing, but a lot of it was also, I kind of cultivated that when I was fighting. I didn't want people to like me. I didn't care. Like, I didn't need them to like me. All I needed them to do, I mean, I kind of wanted them to be scared of me, you know? So when I was fighting, I wasn't trying to make friends out there at all. I was just trying to fuck people up. I mean,
so when you were fighting, did you have any relationships with women, or were you pretty
not
much
good ones?
Not good ones.
No, I didn't. I wouldn't allow them to do. I wouldn't allow them to have much of my time. You know, I didn't. I think to have a successful relationship, you have to spend a lot of time together. You have to communicate. You have to. The person has to almost be first place in your life.
Yeah,
and that was never happening. And so that would come up very often. Like, I was a girl that I was dating in high school. And, you know, I used to teach at the school, so I had keys to the school. So one time I took her up there because I needed to get a workout in, and she wanted to have sex at the gym. And I was like, there's no way. I wouldn't do it. I was like, this place is sacred. Like, there's no chance. Like, she was trying to fool around, and I was adamant. I was like, this is never happening. Like, this might as well be a church to me. I was like, it's not happening. And, you know, I was so horny when I was 17 years old. For me at 17 or 18 to say no to sex was crazy.
Right.
Like,
that's a crazy
not
story.
Happening.
I think we're gonna clip that and put it in a little clip that says Joe Rogan tells a story that no sane man would believe.
Well, you know, that was the first refuge that I had from my life of despair. So for me, I wasn't going to screw that up.
Right.
And I felt like disrespecting the academy like that.
Yeah, well, they had been treating you like an adult. And that's something.
Yes.
That's something when you're a teenager, you know, like to actually be treated that way. It's a good thing not to mess with if you're fortunate enough to have it.
Well, I wouldn't even walk onto the training floor by myself with no one around without bowing.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there was no one there, but I would never leave the common area and step onto the training floor without bowing first.
Right.
Never.
Okay, so when you're in comedy now, you said you were all in as a fighter, and you figure you went all in as a comedian too. And did you do that right from the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, right away. As soon as I realized that I could actually do this, and as soon as I realized, I decided. I mean, my first set that I ever did, I had a bunch of my friends come down and watch me, and I wasn't good the first time I ever got on stage, but I got a couple of little chuckles and laughs, and then I realized this might be possible. I might be able to do this. And then I became obsessed with figuring out how to do it, because it was, I saw it as a path. Like, okay, this is a thing. Like, this is a thing you could do that you actually love. Like, I was a huge fan of the art form. I loved watching it. Ever since my parents took me to the movies when I was like 14 or 15, we saw Live on the Sunset Strip. It was a Richard Pryor movie in the theater.